Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly rapid development of the 2026 El Niño and the cascading effects it's having all over the globe. We've got some fascinating, frankly mind-blowing data coming in from international monitoring agencies, and we're going to break it all down step by step.
So think about this for a second. What actually happens when the world's biggest ocean basically runs a fever? It's absolutely crucial to understand because changes happening way out in the deep Pacific don't just stay in the ocean. Eventually, they ripple out and hit our local weather forecasts, and ultimately, they hit our wallets right at the grocery store. We're looking at a massive climate domino effect here.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2026 El Niño arriving, then look at the record-breaking ocean temperatures, dive into extreme global weather shifts, examine the threats to food security, and finally, look at how we're preparing for these impacts. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The 2026 El Niño arrives and the Pacific shifts. To make sense of the headlines dominating the news right now, we really need to start with what NOAA and the World Meteorological Organization officially declared back in mid-2026.
The foundation of this whole shebang is ENSO, the El Niño Southern Oscillation. You can think of ENSO like a massive cyclical climate engine that literally drives our global weather. It's not just an ocean thing, and it's not just an atmospheric thing. It's a tightly coupled dance between the two. When the ocean temperature shifts in the tropical Pacific, the atmosphere right above it responds, which completely scrambles global atmospheric circulation.
The contrast between the two phases of this cycle is like night and day. After dealing with the cooling effects of a La Niña phase that stubbornly lingered through 2025, we've transitioned into a highly potent, warming El Niño phase. The Pacific essentially flipped its switch from cool to warm, and honestly, it did so with incredible momentum.
The sheer speed of this transition is what's truly staggering. Late 2025, the weak La Niña finally ends. By April 2026, NOAA is already slapping an El Niño watch on the board. Just a month later, satellites detect these massive warm waves, and boom, by June 2026, NOAA officially declares El Niño has formed. It caught forecasters' attention worldwide because this huge shift happened in just a few short months.
Moving to Section 2, record-breaking ocean temperatures, a fever in the Pacific. The lightning-fast speed of this transition is directly tied to the extraordinary ocean heat scientists observed this year.
So how exactly does the ocean heat up that fast? Well, first, a massive reservoir of subsurface heat builds up deep down. Then, as trade winds weaken, all that heat is unleashed. Using data from the Sentinel-6 satellite, NASA actually watched these giant warm Kelvin waves travel eastward, rolling right across the Pacific towards South America. When that huge blob of warm water hits the coast and surfaces, sea surface temperatures completely spike, forcing the atmosphere above it into overdrive.
Now here's the kicker. This isn't your run-of-the-mill average warming cycle. Data from the Copernicus Climate Change Service confirmed that global ocean surface temperatures hit absolutely unprecedented record highs for the month of June 2026. The Financial Times literally reported that this extreme ocean warmth pushed the entire world into genuinely uncharted waters, seriously amplifying long-term climate instability.
You might have heard some pretty intense phrasing thrown around in the media, like Godzilla El Niño, but scientists want us to be a bit careful with that. A Godzilla label doesn't mean a guaranteed Hollywood disaster movie is about to play out in your backyard. What it actually means is that the event severely amplifies the statistical risks of extreme conditions all over the globe. Basically, the dice are loaded for extreme weather.
That brings us to Section 3, extreme global weather shifts. The atmosphere reacts. Once the ocean gets this intensely hot, the atmosphere simply has no choice but to react, completely redistributing extreme weather around the world.
The global reach of this atmospheric ripple effect is just massive. NOAA warned that shifting storm patterns and sea levels create a terrible double whammy for high-tide coastal flooding. Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, ecosystems are dealing with severe marine heat waves. In Europe, Copernicus tracked early-season heat extremes. But here's a wild twist. It's not all intensification. El Niño actually increases wind shear over the Atlantic, which can literally tear tropical storms apart, potentially reducing hurricane activity there. It's a really complex puzzle of localized extremes.
Broadly speaking, the World Meteorological Organization warns that a strong El Niño completely scrambles global precipitation. To put it into perspective, nearly half the risk shifts toward severe droughts, and over a third shifts toward increased flooding.
Depending entirely on where you live, the normal, reliable weather patterns you're used to are thrown right out the window. On to Section 4, Threats to Food Security, the agricultural cost. These wild weather shifts aren't just fascinating meteorology. They directly threaten the absolute foundation of our global food systems and local economies. When you zoom in on specific regional data, the human impact is crystal clear. In India, forecasters warned that El Niño suppresses the vital July monsoon rains, which directly threatens immediate crop planting and critical water supplies. Over in Brazil, a severe drought isn't just bad for farmers. Economists projected it would actually cause national inflation to spike well into 2027. And in Papua New Guinea, frost and drought bring severe risks of food shortages and real rural hardship. It's a direct pipeline from the ocean to the economy.
And look, it's not just local farmers feeling the pinch. Reuters pointed out that certain tropical commodities are extremely exposed to El Niño rainfall shifts. We're talking about everyday staples: coffee, cocoa, sugar, and palm oil. They all rely on highly specific tropical weather that El Niño loves to disrupt, meaning you and I are highly likely to feel this at the grocery store checkout line.
Which leads to Section 5, Preparing for the Impacts, Anticipatory Action. We know the heat is here, and we know exactly what it can do. So what on earth are we doing about it?
The good news here is that global agencies aren't just sitting around. They are actively racing to implement anticipatory actions to soften the blow. They're translating complex climate forecasts into practical, actionable warnings for farmers on the ground. You've got the Famine Early Warning Systems Network actively tracking food security, experts assessing vulnerable water reservoirs, and health organizations tracking concurrent risks. Because, well, extreme heat often makes infectious diseases spread faster. Experts from the Food and Agriculture Organization summed up the gravity of it perfectly. They noted that the 2026 El Niño is arriving during a remarkably fragile period for global food security, with drought risks hitting the most vulnerable farming regions. When you layer a potentially historic El Niño on top of a system already stressed by conflicts and past climate shocks, taking anticipatory action isn't just a nice idea. It's absolutely essential for survival. I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. As we keep tracking this potentially historic 2026 event, the most vital question is this: how can humanity successfully adapt our agriculture, our infrastructure, and our supply chains to withstand these magnified climate shocks? El Niño is a natural cycle, sure, but when it interacts with a permanently warming world, the rules of the game change completely. It's something we absolutely have to be paying attention to. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.